I know how tragic it is, the situation in the Gaza Strip, and we have been reporting about it in the past 1 month. However, this war could expand. This war could go out of hands and it could spread in the entire region, in West Asia or in the Middle East. And it could include countries such as Lebanon, could include Syria, could include Iran, could include the United States. So we're speaking about regional powers and also international powers. This could have global ramifications for the entire global economy, for the energy markets, for the human lives in these countries. Please remember, guys, that in the past 2 decades, around 2 million people perished by the American wars. And that is why we're here presenting to you some of the facts that you may be interested in so that you also do your part and do not consent for what may come next. And my fears are that there could be regional war, as I mentioned, and why I'm saying that. So I was sitting today and I wrote some analysis I would like to share with you today at the beginning of this video. If you guys were following the previous live streamings, I've been warning that the presence of the US aircraft carriers, the warships, and the nuclear submarines in the Middle East or West Asia are not only to quote unquote deter Hezbollah, but also to threaten Syria and possibly also Egypt, to intimidate Egypt to accept the 2.2 million Palestinian refugees and also threaten Syria, as I told you previously. Today, I summarize the indications that the United States and Israel are seeing. That I summarize those indications that the US and Israel are seeing an opportunity in the recent onslaught against Gaza, and they want to expand the war to Lebanon and possibly Syria too. The first indication, if you follow the regime change war in Syria initiated by the United States since 2011, you will come to the conclusion that these terrorist groups, that different terrorist groups, including Al Qaeda and ISIS, those are like contract armies of the United States operating under the US command against the enemies of Washington, D.C. And those enemies were mainly the Syrian army, Hezbollah, the National Defense Forces, and other allied militant groups. This week, ISIS and Al Qaeda cells were activated again against the Syrian army positions in Syria, and they killed over 30 Syrian soldiers. Personally, I don't think these are coincidences. I believe they are coordinated and guided by foreign intelligence apparatuses, especially in the region and abroad. One of the attacks happened in northern Latakia by Al Qaeda. They are infiltrating from the mountains in northern Latakia against the positions of the Syrian army, and those areas are mostly held by HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or Al Qaeda, and also the Turkestan army. Islamic Turkestan army are the Uyghurs who came from China. Erdogan brought them first to Hatay or Liwa Iskandaron, and from Iskandaron he pushed them to Syria. There are around 5,000 militants from the Uyghur community. The overall community is around 15 to 20,000 Uyghurs in Idlib. The second indication, the Israeli side bombed today morning actually, a military post for Hezbollah in the central city of Homs. As Homs is in Syria, it is close to Lebanon, and Israel killed 7 Hezbollah militants. Now, in the past years, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah said, if Israel targets the Lebanese group in Syria, Hezbollah will respond from Lebanon against Israeli targets. And since then, this was 5-6 years ago. And since then, Israel avoided killing Hezbollah militants in Syria, which turned into an undeclared but well established rule of engagement. Israel respected this rule of engagement, and Hezbollah, in return, respected this rule of engagement. However, today, Israel broke this rule of engagement and hit a Hezbollah site inside Syria, not in Lebanon, which indicates Tel Aviv is provoking Hezbollah for greater response from southern Lebanon against the northern settlements in Israel and hence expanding the war. The third indication, nuclear submarines arrived to the region, and the announcement of the arrival of these submarines to the region, in my opinion, are very important because usually they don't tell the public, the general public, that they have sent a nuclear submarine, but they purposely published this information. And CETCOM, the command center of the Americans in Qatar, they even published some photos of these submarines. And this indicates that the United States is flexing its muscles in the region to deter Iran. This is the important thing. Those are not for Hezbollah, as I told you. Those are to deter Iran. And um, because they don't want Iran to intervene, they want to expand the war that may include in Lebanon and Syria and sideline Iran from this conflict. So, in my opinion, the anti-Israeli alliance in the region, of course, is capable of dealing with the warships and the aircraft carriers. They have the technology, they have the missiles, they have the kamikaze drones to deal with these warships and aircraft carriers of the Americans. However, a tactical, they don't have the means to deal with the nuclear submarines of the United States in the region. As far as I know, they don't have these means, whether it's the military means or the technological means to counter it, unless Iran can enrich uranium at a faster pace and acquire a nuclear weapon in the next few weeks or months. Because, in my opinion, this we are speaking about the next few weeks, and it will be clear for us whether this war will expand to the region or not. But if the Americans were able to use a tactical nuclear warhead, for example, a bomb against Syria, they could paralyze the entire country. They could paralyze the state institutions. They could paralyze the Syrian army. So, this is the third indication. The fourth indication, the Ukraine war is a stalemate. This is the narrative that the United States is now spreading all over the mainstream press, and this is not a coincidence. They want to pause the war in Ukraine because the United States cannot afford two wars at the same time. Those are two major wars. Those are not small conflicts. Those are major wars against major foes of the United States and also now in the region, major foes of Israel. And they're asking and urging Zelensky to strike a peace deal with Russia. The establishment pundits, of course, are also writing opinion pieces after another and arguing why Israel is more important now than Ukraine and why the United States should prioritize the conflict in the Middle East over the conflict in Ukraine. And I will come later in this live streaming and I will show you some of the examples of how these establishment pundits and journalists are purposely, again, writing these opinion articles and spreading this argument and narratives because they want to pause the conflict now in Ukraine. And these four indications may be enough signals, in my opinion, that there is a serious possibility for regional war. In US and Israeli calculations, they see Syria, after 12 years of regime change war, as the weaker link in the alliance which includes Iran, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and some other non-state actors in the region. And they believe in Israel and the United States that if Syria falls, the rest of the alliance can collapse because Syria represents the link between Tehran, Baghdad, and Beirut. And this was one of the main reasons for the regime change war that was initiated by the CIA and the Pentagon since 2011. They wanted to subjugate and to change the regime in Syria for this main reason, because they wanted to break this organic and geographical linkage between these different countries and these different powers, because they represent a threat to Israel. Now, if Syria falls, it will be divided and partitioned to at least four parts. The Kurds will have their share in the eastern shore of the Euphrates, where they have American forces and they have most of the oil and gas fields and also the wheat. The Druze will definitely try to take their piece of cake in Sweden, and I'm not talking about everyone, right? Like, not generalizing, but if you can buy the leaderships and the people who represent these different ethnicities and religious groups, you can manage the division and partition of Syria. And this was on the plan of the Americans when they said we're going to create a new Middle East in 2006, and they wanted to divide the countries on sectarian and religious lines. And they have done it, for example, in Iraq. You can see there are three different regions there: a Sunni region, a Kurdish region, and a Shiite region, for example. And they want to do similar thing in Syria. So they are planning for a Kurdish region, a Druze region, a Sunni region, and an Alawite region. This is their plan. Okay. It is believed that in Syria, it is believed that the current leadership in Damascus, headed by Assad, represent the unifying factor of the different ethnic and religious groups in Syria. It's always, if you ask the people in Syria, especially the people who are pro-government, and in my opinion, most of the people in Syria, the majority are pro-government or pro-Assad, let's say, they say that Assad represents the unifying factor. He is the person who is unifying all these different religious and ethnic groups in Syria. And if he leaves the country and some pro-American personality comes, this person will definitely try to divide the country, as I mentioned previously. That's why they see in the expansion of the war, the Americans and the Israelis, therefore, they see the expansion of the war as an opportunity to finish what they started in 2011 after the failure of their proxies. They tried through their proxies, they funded, supported, armed, trained, they dumped weaponry in Syria worth tens of billions of dollars, and they failed. They couldn't overthrow the regime in Syria. And the allies of Syria, mainly Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, and other non-state actors, they came to help Syria, and they defeated the armed rebellion against Assad. And rest assured, guys, if the US and Israel strike Syria, you will see their proxies moving in the eastern shore of the Euphrates. So the Kurds will try to gain more territories in the eastern shore of the Euphrates, and you will see their proxies in Idlib and in northern Syria, mainly HTS, Jaish al-Islam, Qaeda, and all these elements. You will see them moving from Idlib and northern Aleppo to the city of Aleppo to occupy it again. And of course, they will be supported by Turkey. And in the south, in Daraa and in Sueda, their proxies, they will try to seal the borders with the occupied Golan Heights, with Jordan and with Iraq. And the first thing that the new government will do in Syria, they will recognize the sovereignty of Israel over the occupied Golan Heights. Those are my analyses, those are my predictions of what could happen if the Americans and the Israelis expand the war in the region and try to trigger a regional war. This American project will not only hit Syria, in my opinion, but also will limit Iran's and Russia's access to the region. If you, let's say, somehow paralyze Syria and the regime or the whatever you want to call it, the leadership crumbles, then of course the interest of Iran and Russia will also be targeted and hit there, right? But also, it will also hit China's interests, especially, namely, the Silk Road Initiative in West Asia. And we can see nowadays that the Americans are trying to find an alternative route for this Silk Road Initiative. I believe it is coming from India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, etc. So they're trying to find an alternative for that. And I think that this is one of the also reasons why the Americans have occupation forces in the eastern shore of the Euphrates near the Iraqi borders, because they also want to block China's free access to the eastern Mediterranean. Because if the Silk and Road Initiative moves freely between China, Central Asia, and in the Middle East to Eastern Mediterranean, this will be a big boost and boom for the Chinese project and the Chinese investments and the Chinese position in the global affairs. So this is the American plan. How will Syria, Russia, and Iran react? That's the important question that, in my opinion, no one can predict concretely, or let's say clearly, or we have to wait and see how will they react. But if I want to speculate, I think that Hezbollah will definitely launch a ground invasion if it happened on northern Israel. Iran will hit the American bases, warships, and assets in the region, and Syria will fire its long range missiles on Israel. Now, we're not speaking about some of these drone attacks or rocket attacks, right? If this war expands, you will definitely see cruise missiles, you will definitely see ballistic missiles, you will definitely see precision missiles, you will see missiles that can inflict heavy damage on the American positions in the Middle East, in the Persian Gulf countries, its assets, its economic interests. Israel will be definitely hit. So it is a very crazy scenario, right? But I wanted to make this video and I wanted to explain all these different indications so that it can stay as an archive. If it happens in the future, we know that somebody has warned, or we knew that there are indications that could lead into such war. So take it as a just a warning that this could come next. So it's a frightening scenario, but this is what some of the radical ideologues are calling Armageddon. And politicians, talking heads, religious figures, they're speaking day and night about Armageddon and how this war should probably expand and create more bloodshed in the region. And they're expecting the return of the Messiah and all this, in my opinion, illusions. Those are, in my opinion, illusions. The Messiah, in my opinion, is not going to come the second time, and even if he is going to come, there is no need for bloodshed and tens of thousands of people. There is no need to perish tens of thousands of people for Messiah to come. What kind of ideology is that?